Welcome to Cancer 101. Clinical trials are studies designed to find better ways to treat cancer patients. So does that mean that a patient in one of those trials is a guinea pig? It's a valid question, and so let's explore that. First of all, there are different types of clinical trials. They usually are designated by phase, so there's phase 1, 2, 3, and even a phase 4 trial. Let's begin by talking about phase 3 trials because given the numbers in phase 3 trials, which are often quite large, 50, 100, 400 patients, if you are in a clinical trial, typically it's going to be a phase 3 trial. Phase 2 and especially phase 1 trials are much smaller. So let's talk about how a phase 3 trial works. Let's say you're a patient and the doctors, enrolled you in a clinical trial. Does that mean you might get a placebo? In other words, are they going to give you a sugar pill instead of giving you this new treatment that they're trying to see if it's going to be this great new thing for your type of cancer? And the short answer is no, they're not going to do that. They will typically split up the patients into two separate groups. One group will receive the very best standard treatment of the day. In other words, the kind of treatment that you would receive anyway by your doctor according to the latest studies that have been done and so forth. The other group of patients then would receive the best standard treatment of the day, and typically they would add on an additional treatment. This would be the new treatment group. So in fact, all of the patients in the study, even though they're split into two groups, they get the best standard treatment of the day. And it's only about half the patients then who would get this additional new therapy. And then they can compare the two groups and see, in fact, if one of the groups does better or worse than the other group. And then hopefully make a decision on whether this could become the new standard treatment. If they get good results, then that's likely what will happen after a number of perhaps other studies. So in fact, I think by anyone's definition, that would not be considered a guinea pig situation. Most people think of a guinea pig situation as you get the new treatment and they just see what happens, and it's never been tried on anyone before or something along those lines. Let's talk now about phase 1 trials. Phase 1 trials are much smaller trials, often involving just a handful of people, 8 or 10 or perhaps 20. And in those trials, what they're trying to do is to figure out what is a safe dosage to give to the patients. These are trials where the new drug has never actually been tried on humans before. It's only been tried on what are called murine models. A murine model means rats or mice. So, of course, they test these things out in the laboratory. They try to figure out what an appropriate dosage might be. And then they start giving it to humans, and they start increasing the dosage to see what potential side effects might be or whether they can safely administer it to patients or not. And so in that sense, a phase 1 trial might be more along your definition of being a guinea pig in a trial. But as I say, since there's such small numbers in those kinds of trials, it's unlikely that you're going to be a patient in one of those trials. In fact, you can simply say, look, doc, I want to take part in clinical trials, but no phase 1 or phase 2 trials, only phase 3 trials where they've already had a lot of experience with the drug. They know what the potential side effects are, and so on. Typically, these clinical trials then for cancer are looking at new drug regimens for adjuvant therapy, like new chemotherapies, or maybe it's an old chemotherapy with a modified dose, or maybe it's two old chemotherapies that used to be used alone, and now they're going to combine them together to see if that improves the results. Or maybe they're adding hormonal therapy or radiation therapy or whatever. But how about surgery? Do they do clinical trials for surgery? Well, typically they don't, because it's hard to blind a surgical study. Blinding means the patient or perhaps the doctors don't know whether the patient is receiving the new treatment. So a single-blinded study is where the patients don't know they're receiving a new treatment. In other words, maybe they're given a sugar pill saying, oh, this is the new treatment, when in fact there's no active ingredient. So half the patients get a sugar pill and the other half get the actual treatment. That's easy enough to hide, both from the doctors and from the patients, but surgery is not, obviously. So that doesn't do well in what's called the gold standard of medical research. The gold standard is where you have a double-blinded study. That means both the patients don't know that whether they're receiving the new treatment or not, and also the doctors don't know. And that way, hopefully you can eliminate a lot of the bias in any kind of drug study. How do you find clinical trials? Well, you go to my favorite site, cancer.gov. You look up your type of cancer, and there's different ways you could do that. Search or look under cancer types. And let's say it's bladder cancer. You select that, and then there'll be somewhere around there'll be a link saying clinical trials, and you simply click on that and go into clinical trials, and you can narrow it down. You can do a simple narrowing, or you can do a more advanced search. You can also look just for clinical trials in your area, and you can look by stage and so forth, or types of treatment options, you know. Maybe you're looking for a new chemotherapy type treatment. You could narrow it down by that. So that's typically how you find clinical trials. And there's also clinicaltrials.gov is another site you could go to.